Hello and welcome to the Sunday Guardian show by Joyeeta Basu. Viewers, as you know, a lot is happening on the US Pakistan front in particular. As you know, Donald Trump invited Asim Munir for lunch. We wonder what was served on that lunch table, but we for certain know that apparently a whole lot of promises were made about defense deals, about money also perhaps, and also that he got a kind of a guided tour of the State Department and Pentagon and all that. So what exactly is going on? We in India are wondering. To discuss this and much more, I've got a very special guest with me, Michael Rubin, who is Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and also Director of Policy Analysis at the Middle East Forum. Previously, he worked in the Office of the Secretary of Defense and as a lecturer of history in US, Israel, and Iraq. He joins this show from the US. Welcome to this show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, now so tell me, what explains this sudden newfound love between Donald Trump and Asim Munir?
You know, I'm not going to justify the love, but I'll try to explain it analytically. Trump has this issue with both generals and Islamists. And in the guise of Asim Munir, he has both. I mean, think about it. Trump wanted to meet with the Taliban. He embraced Ahmed al-Shara, the new Syrian leader, who led an al-Qaeda faction and had a $10 million bounty on his head. He didn't hesitate to break diplomatic China and order his envoy to negotiate with Hamas. I mean, when we look at Asim Munir, he really is no different than Osama bin Laden in a business suit. He's no different than Ahmed al-Shara. And so somehow Donald Trump, in a single-minded quest to win a Nobel Prize, will seek out the most evil people who lead countries or who have power in countries and embrace them. It really is a negative phenomena that is making the world more unsafe as Donald Trump seeks to do what's necessary to assuage his ego rather than what represents common sense.
But when you're talking about Nobel Peace Prize, is this actually a serious quest he is on? I mean, to decide a policy based on one's quest for the Nobel Peace Prize in this case, as you said, it's about his ego? Is it really
I do think it's about his ego. He has talked about the Nobel Prize, and his supporters have, and he wouldn't be the first person whose desire to win a Nobel Prize led him down the path of making really bad deals that make the world increasingly unsafe. I don't think you can separate analysis from recognition that Trump's ego runs supreme.
So in this case, how is inviting Asim Munir helping him win the Nobel Prize?
Well, first of all, let's be blunt. There's no way Trump is ever going to win the Nobel Prize. The problem is he doesn't realize that. But when it comes to Asim Munir, the other factor that's at play is that Trump believes that perhaps Pakistan is going to be somehow necessary in order to bring Iran to its heels. Trump is also quite serious when he says unconditional surrender. Now, if there is an unconditional surrender on the part of Ali Khamenei, if Ali Khamenei is forced to give a speech like Ayatollah Khomeini did back on June 21st, 1988, when Khomeini got on the radio and he said, it's like drinking from a chalice of poison, but I have no choice but to drink from this cup if I want the Islamic Republic to survive. That's the speech he made before he signed the ceasefire with Saddam Hussein's Iraq to end the Iran-Iraq war. If Khamenei has to do something like that, then we're talking about taking out Iran's nuclear material, its weapons work, its enriched uranium stockpile, and so forth. Is it possible that Donald Trump thinks that Pakistan could play a role in that? My advice would be to tell the Indians, you need to get in on this quickly and suggest, as the only party that's trusted by the Israelis, by the Iranians, and by the Americans, that it should be the Indians through the port of Chabahar that will remove Iran's nuclear material if and when Khamenei surrenders.
So, which way do you think this particular war is headed, and what role can possibly Pakistan play in this?
Well, a lot of people are actually misinterpreting what Donald Trump said with regard to a 2 week pause. Donald Trump did not say he will wait 2 weeks. He said he will wait up to 2 weeks, which is Donald Trump being Donald Trump and playing very deliberately with language, which means the United States could, in theory, act much sooner. Now, of course, there's debate about war powers in Washington and whether Congress needs to approve. But the president has great discretion without congressional action to act immediately so long as it's not committing U.S. troops to a long-term combat. If you're talking about using a B-2 stealth bomber to drop a bunker buster bomb on Fordo, then ultimately Trump doesn't need congressional buy-in for that. Perhaps that's what he's getting prepared to do. The other thing the United States is doing right now is resupplying Israel's interceptors because Israel is running low. And it appears that the United States is also supporting Israel with refueling operations because Israeli jets need to refuel both to go into Iran and to return from Iran. So you have a situation where the United States is going to be involved in the background. Now, the more interesting thing, which also hasn't been widely reported, is if you look at satellite imagery of the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, you will find that there is not a single American airplane there anymore. I haven't seen satellite imagery from Bahrain, but I suspect the same thing is true there. It shows that the United States is preparing for action by removing our forces and our hardware from the ability of Iran to retaliate. And so I think something more is in the works right now.
So, are they seriously considering using Pakistan as a base?
Unfortunately, I think that Trump is. But look, Trump is the same person who seriously considers Erdogan to be a best friend. I mean, Trump is a person who believed that the Taliban could be sincere partners. I mean, it's one thing to be a real estate mogul in New York City. It's another thing to have common sense on the world stage. And unfortunately, the wrong people seem to be whispering into Trump's ear. How he got to Field Marshal Asim Munir, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, perhaps his best friend, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, is whispering into his ear. And it also wouldn't surprise me, although I have no proof, if the Emir of Qatar is somehow bribing Donald Trump and telling him he should go with Pakistan. If we look at world affairs just through the lens of U.S. national interest in U.S. security, Qatar, Pakistan, and Turkey would be designated state sponsors of terror. If we look at world affairs in Donald Trump's administration through the lens of potential bribery, honestly, that's the only explanation I can think of that would allow Donald Trump to act the way he's acting, to constantly defer to Turkey and Qatar, and in this case, Pakistan.
Well, that's a very, very serious charge. But in this case, there is some talk about this crypto deal. That crypto deal, which is like one of the reasons why Trump is perhaps so positive towards Pakistan.
That could be the case. And look, one of the things that worries me is someone who cares deeply about American security. And look, I'm an American. I care more about American security than I care about the security of other countries. But when I look at this, what I worry about is this. What I've seen some reports of is that in exchange for Pakistan allowing U.S. forces to use its territory, perhaps to go into Iran in some way, special commando units to neutralize key figures, perhaps to kidnap key figures such as nuclear scientists. What I worry about is that Pakistan may have been promised American technology. Now, from an Indian standpoint, India would, of course, be concerned that any such American technology Pakistan would likely use against it. From an American standpoint, what I worry about most is that Pakistan is going to allow the Chinese or the Turks to reverse engineer any American technology they get their hands on. And that ultimately is going to be used not only to kill Indians, but to kill Americans as well.
I mean, isn't there anyone to possibly tell he is the president of the US after all, that after all, whether he likes it or not, the fact of the matter is that Pakistan is a proxy state of China. Doesn't he realize that? Don't the policymakers in the US realize that?
Look, a number of policymakers in the US realize it, and there's two ways that we can approach this. Number one is look at what happened during Donald Trump's first term, where Donald Trump would say something, and then his staff quietly would try to mitigate the damage, impose some sort of logic after the fact, and try to constrain Donald Trump. The other possibility is to work with Congress. India has cultivated an Indian caucus within Congress. It's bipartisan. But is that Indian caucus meant to simply enjoy receptions with good Indian food and perhaps encourage trips to India? Or is it actually going to work to the benefit of both countries' national security? If the latter is the case, and I certainly hope it will be, then it's time to get congressional leaders to start asserting their oversight role. Because after all, Congress doesn't work for Donald Trump, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. Congress is an equal branch of power of government, and it should be able to assert itself in order to constrain any sort of deal making Donald Trump may make, especially when it comes to transfer of sensitive military technology to Pakistan. At the same time, if Congress wanted to demand that the State Department or others designate Pakistan as a state sponsor of terror, they could. And if Marco Rubio, as National Security Advisor and as Secretary of State, isn't willing to do that, Congress can also pass sanctions on Pakistan that are equal to what would be automatically imposed should it be designated a state sponsor of terror. So whether or not it gets the formal designation, you can still get the formal sanctions on Pakistan. The question is whether we're going to do that. Look, I'm dumbfounded at how Pakistan can make end runs, especially after Pogroom. I mean, for the United States to deal with Pakistan today after its terrorism on April 22nd would be akin to India embracing Hamas on October 8th, 2023. I mean, look, there is no way to put a glean on this or to somehow add a logic. This moral equivalence is completely inappropriate. And if I were India, I would be furious. I would be so furious, I would probably recall my ambassador for consultations. I would shock Washington in that way.
Well, of course, Indians are. I mean, the thing is, you see, you must have seen that statement that came from our foreign secretary, where it was made very, very clear. I mean, it was very polite, but at the same time, it was very, very, I would say, cutting in a way that, that we have had enough. That kind of a statement it was. So the thing is, see, when you are
Oh,
looking, yeah, please.
no, I know and I get it. But do you think Donald Trump understands polite? What I'm suggesting is you have to take the next step. And again, I'm not saying sever diplomatic relations. I'm not saying anything extreme like that. I'm saying recall your ambassador from Washington. And that's going to serve two purposes. Number one, it's going to shock the establishment in Washington. And number two, it's going to raise questions about if the Indian ambassador isn't in Washington for a few days, can they go to the American ambassador in India? No, because we don't have one there.
Yeah,
So it's going to
exactly.
kill two birds with one stone.
What explains the delay in appointing an ambassador to India?
Well, at this point, the Trump administration isn't appointing too many ambassadors anywhere. I have friends who serve as professional foreign service career diplomats. Some of them are up for ambassadorships. And what the Trump administration has done is both frozen the ability of career foreign service officers to become ambassadors, and he's also canceled what we call the A100 class, which is once you pass the Foreign Service Civil Service exam and you're offered a position in the State Department, there's an introductory class that you have to take. That's been canceled. So all the people that pass the exam can't actually enter the diplomatic corps. They're all scrambling to find new jobs now. So what he's done is really paralyze the Foreign Service. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't ambassadors being appointed. He's appointing political ambassadors. And the question then becomes, that's not something Congress can handle. That's something that India should be able to pressure Donald Trump to saying, look, we get it. You're not going to put a career diplomat in India. Frankly, the most recent ambassadors from the United States to India have also been political appointments. But we've had enough. We've had enough with your cultivation of Pakistan. We've had enough of your blind eye towards Pakistan, and we've had enough of the insult. And I would put it in that way, the insult of you not appointing an ambassador here months ago.
There is some speculation here in terms of when Trump actually invited Modi, when Trump made a call to Modi when he was in Canada and say, why don't you come over? And there was some speculation that he was perhaps trying to get Modi also on the same lunch table with Asim Munir and basically click a few photos and say, I have made peace. And it's all meant for his MAGA base. Is this how foreign policy is being decided by Donald Trump? Everything it suits as ego, interest, or his vote?
Yes. And again, I circle back to the Nobel Prize. I think Modi was wise to not take that invitation because you don't trick people into peace and you can't force peace with someone that is an ideological enemy. Again, I repeat, the only difference between Asim Munir and Osama bin Laden is the suit they wear and the fact that Osama bin Laden, before he got embraced in Abbottabad, lived in a cave, and Asim Munir basically lives in a palace. And other than that, the two of them are rather similar. The other difference is Asim Munir never pretended to be a field marshal. I mean, sorry, Brick.
Osama.
The only other difference is Osama bin Laden never pretended to be a field marshal.
This guy promoted himself as field marshal.
Well, I mean, he's playing dress up as part of his cover so that people stop calling him a terrorist. He's basically showing his middle finger to both the Pakistani public, to India, and to the international community, saying, I'm going to sponsor terrorism. I'm going to have terrorists, which I trained, interrogate tourists, ask them if they are Hindu or not, try to force them to recite Islamic verse. And if they can't, I'm going to execute them. And you can't do anything about it. Not only am I not going to get condemned or face sanctions, I'm going to get a promotion. And the fact of it is, Asim Munir is perhaps the most dangerous man in Pakistan in more than 50 years. More dangerous than even someone like Hamid Gul.
Okay, why would you say that?
Because of I mean, the ideology is the same, the ego is the same, but the confidence which he has in being able to literally get away with murder is making me worry that we, both India and the United States, are in for another round of terror that is going to be just as bad, that is going to be just as bad as what we've seen on 9/11 and at Pogrom and in Mumbai in 2008.
So how is, there is a belief that is kind of, there's a view that is growing that suddenly worldwide terrorism is no longer a matter of discussion anymore. And perhaps because that pause that has come in, because perhaps the focus has shifted, especially after Donald Trump coming in, so that, let's put it this way, terrorists are being normalized. That is the reason why Pakistan and particularly people like Asim Munir are getting so much confidence.
Let me put it this way. As you know, I worked in the George W. Bush administration. One of the problems of the George W. Bush administration and its global war on terror was that terrorism is a tactic, and you can't declare a global war on a tactic. It's like declaring a global war on tanks or a global war on infantry charges. The real problem, and this is what George W. Bush either didn't realize or didn't want to say out of political correctness, is the ideology driving terror. So on one hand, the global war on terror has fallen to the side because it never addressed the key issue, which wasn't the terrorism. It was the ideology driving the terrorism. And what Trump is remaining blind to right now, especially in embracing Asim Munir, is that, in a sense, he's not only not addressing the problem of terrorism, he's laundering it. He's enabling it. He's catalyzing it. Donald Trump may not, certainly I don't think Donald Trump is a terrorist, but he is a useful idiot for terrorists.
That's a very strong statement to make. But the thing is that, people are actually worried. Indians are especially
Look,
worried.
Joy, I'm not a diplomat, and so
yeah, please.
sorry, I'm not a diplomat, and I believe in saying things directly rather than putting a diplomatic sheen on it. So if it's a strong statement, I do stand by it.
Okay, that's excellent. Absolutely. India finds it outrageous that a terrorist state, that India, the world's most populous democracy, with a leader who has been elected democratically for the third time by the people of the country, to be equated with basically what is a terror state and an army chief. How insensitive or how ignorant one can be. I'm talking about Donald Trump in this case, that he does not even understand the basics of, this is how you deal with international relations or international partners.
Yeah, look, I hear your frustration, and I'm going to raise it, to use a poker analogy. The way I look at this is that for more than 25 years, ever since the George W. Bush administration, there has been a bipartisan effort in Washington to cultivate U.S.-India ties. And through his own sheer incompetence, Donald Trump is not only making a mistake now, he's making a mistake which is going to obviate a quarter century of hard work, because India would be right to look at U.S. presidents in the future and say, why should we trust you? There could always be another Donald Trump wannabe who's going to cash in the goodwill and who's going to be so enamored with terrorism and Islamists that he's going to subordinate himself to Pakistan and essentially bend over so that a person like Asim Munir can have his way with him.
And it wasn't like this even in his first term. That is what is something is surprising us the most.
And this is why I think perhaps, and I have no evidence to back this up, but I worry about whether Qatar or Turkey have bribed Donald Trump to act the way he's acting. I'm just thinking of possible explanations, and quite honestly, the Nobel Prize and the issue of bribery are the only two that seem to me able to explain the current situation.
Now, what sort of a role do you think when you're talking about, say, for example, can the US trust Pakistan when it comes to Iran?
No, I mean, well, first of all, Pakistan might try to do what it has committed to doing, but at the same time, it's going to constantly put new impediments in the place because what Pakistan does is it always raises the cost. It always extorts. The only thing Pakistan understands and the ISI understands is extortion because without being able to extort money for themselves, most of which doesn't help the Pakistani people, how are they going to buy their properties, their luxury villas in Dubai? How are they going to be able to buy their real estate in London or their offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and in Panama? The fact of the matter is, the ISI, let me put it this way, the ISI doesn't excel at military tactics. It doesn't excel at military competence, and we saw this with Operation Sindoor. What Pakistan excels at is extortion and terrorism. That's the specialty of the ISI, and they're going to return to the playbook they used during the support for the Mujahideen under Soviet occupation in Afghanistan, and then after 9/11, when Pakistan regularly extorted. And remember, Joy, I've told you this before, I think. I visited one of the former heads of the ISI. I sat in the Islamabad club in the middle of Islamabad and had a whiskey with him as he said that the biggest mistake that Musharraf made was when George Bush said, "You're either with us or against us." What the former head of the ISI told me is we never should have said we were with you. We should have made you pay for absolutely everything you want. That's the lesson the ISI has taken, and that's what we're going to see now. Donald Trump, the more desperate he appears, the higher the price from Pakistan, but it's not going to change Pakistan's sincerity.
So, how does it impact India-US relations, especially? I mean, in terms of how does it affect Mr. Trump's ego? Because that is now so much of any foreign policy. Everybody will have to factor in that aspect as well when it comes to dealing with the US. How does it affect Mr. Trump's ego that India is absolutely clear that he had nothing to do with the ceasefire that was decided between India and Pakistan, and that it was on Pakistan's request that we went for it? Because he's
Yeah,
constantly going around
I mean,
saying, yeah, please.
Donald Trump constructs his own reality. Ultimately, you don't want to call Donald Trump a liar to his face, but at the same time, you need to stand firm without gratuitously insulting him. Again, this is one of the reasons why I believe that it's important to withdraw the Indian ambassador from Washington for consultations so that people around Donald Trump, especially Marco Rubio, will be able to work the problem which you're addressing, but recognize that India is too important to simply allow itself to be used as a football to kick around.
Okay. So do you think the US-India relations, of course, I keep hearing that a lot of work is happening in terms of Quad and that Mr. Trump may be even coming to India. But then, of course, Asim Munir has also invited Donald Trump to Pakistan. And if he visits, I think it will be in a long, long time that any US president has visited Pakistan. Do you think he even may do that?
Know whether he will do that. Look, I'm a historian by training, so I get paid to predict the past. I don't have a crystal ball, especially when it comes to Donald Trump. But again, successive American administrations have sought to break the old pattern by which every visit to New Delhi was coupled with a visit to Islamabad, whether it was from a CIA chief, whether it was from the Secretary of State, or whether it was from a president. The fact of the matter is, we shouldn't fall back into the trap of decades earlier in which we would have this pairing between New Delhi and Islamabad. The two countries aren't equivalent. India, of course, is the world's largest democracy, and it's a strategic powerhouse for the 21st century. Pakistan has much more in common with Somalia than it does with India. Pakistan is a state teetering on the brink of failure. It's a corrupt dictatorship, and there's no reason to tie India and Pakistan together. I do think that if Donald Trump were to go to Islamabad, the people, or want to go to Islamabad, the people who would most try to dissuade him would probably be the U.S. Secret Service. Because if the U.S. Secret Service can't adequately protect him in Butler, Pennsylvania, where he faced that assassination attempt, how the heck are they going to protect him in a society so riddled with terrorists and militants as Pakistan is?
Yeah. So, in terms of, do you see India US relations being back to normal? Because let's also not forget that Pakistan, in spite of whatever it is still a major non NATO ally of the US. And the thing is, India is also a strategic partner. But do you think India US relations have some future in the short term, at least when Donald Trump is president?
I don't think that India-US relations are going to take off in the way they should until Donald Trump moves on, until Donald Trump leaves. Because Donald Trump, at this point, I mean, for whatever motives, and we've already discussed possible scenarios, he seems willingly or unwillingly intent on shredding all the progress which has been made in relations over the 25 years. Let me be blunt again. This is not how the United States should treat a partner. The way the United States is treating India is shameful, and that rests solely on Donald Trump's recent actions. It's going to be up to India to decide whether they want to forgive that or not, and if they're willing to forgive that during Donald Trump's term, or whether they're going to wait until he moves on.
Yeah, and my last question, of course, is that with all the stuff that Pakistan has been offered by Trump, apparently military hardware and all, even money may be coming. Number one, will they ever go back to FATF in spite that FATF grey list? And do you think Pakistan will be actually able to tilt the regional balance of power in its favor if with Trump's backing?
No, I don't think Pakistan is going to be able to tip the regional balance because no matter what military equipment Pakistan has, it doesn't overcome the fundamental corruption of the Pakistani army. Um, we've seen this time and time again that when you have corruption in your ranks, whether it was Armenia prior to the 2020 Nagorno-Karabakh war, whether it's the Democratic Republic of Congo right now, which was defeated by Rwanda. The fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter how many billions of dollars worth of hardware you have. What matters is if your army is corrupt, you're going to lose. And the one thing which Asim Munir is afraid to tackle is corruption in the Pakistani armed forces. Because if he were to attack corruption, the first person he would have to attack would be himself.
And will India succeed in its effort to put Pakistan back on FATF grey list when Pakistan has now Donald Trump's backing?
Well, let me put it this way. When we look at the recent Israel-Iran conflict, perhaps Donald Trump wanted Bibi Netanyahu to wait even longer before attacking Iran, targeting in an operation which was planned for more than 20 years. But ultimately, Bibi Netanyahu realized he needed to do what was in Israel's interest. If you can work in conjunction with the United States, that's great. But if it's a choice between appeasing Washington, which can, as you know, sometimes act simplistically and naively, if it's a choice between that and your own country's national security, any democratic leader has got to choose their own country's national security. So India's got to be prepared to do what they need to do directly. And what we also see with Donald Trump and Israel is Donald Trump, even if Israel annoyed him by defying him, Donald Trump likes to share other people's victory. He likes to steal the glory. And so if India is able to show itself to be the stronger party, if it's able to humiliate Pakistan like it did with Operation Sindoor, then ultimately Donald Trump is going to come around to India again.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you. Thank you, Michael, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, and thank you, viewers, for watching. Until the next time.